Oni's a tough matchup, I think, for the Onimaru player, and we'll do the traditional rook speed for the replay. Just before we hop in, we can look at what was the best way to describe. I guess talk about neutral real quick. It's kind of tradition, I guess, for Onimaru players to have to test if their opponent can react to forward A and ground B, and those are like the pillars of the matchup, I guess. It's very important for Rook to be able to catch forward A and ground B with ground C. As long as you can do that, Oni's limited to basically just using back A to keep Rook out on the ground. And back A, while it's good, effective at pushing out, it knocks down on hit, sets up guard crush stuff. It also it's really bad against jumps. If Rook predicts correctly, then you get a bunch of damage on Oni. So Oni has to really work to not be predictable with their setup and to anti-air effectively whenever they correctly wait long enough. They outweight the Rook. For Rook's part, Rook wants to walk down, guess jump at the right time, but always be ready to react in neutral. There are some sketchy positions where Rook doesn't have the range to do a profitable reaction to long range pokes from Oni. I don't know if we'll end up seeing it in these games though.
Round one. Fight.
So yeah, right at the start, Rook's walking forward, and I get fortunate. So I try to react to stuff like that, even though it's not super practical, because specifically, and there's good things other people have written about reactions to moves and what you think about whenever you decide if you want to commit to reacting to something. In this situation, I know that there aren't a whole lot of moves that Oni can do that make sense to keep me outside of forward A, ground B, and maybe ground C, the one that lowers Oni. And I have good visual cues for forward A and ground B, but since I think Skippy knows to just use back A, I've focused reactions on waiting to see any sort of movement from Oni that isn't walking backward. And as soon as I've seen it, it could have been him jumping, it could have been Oni doing, probably neutral A would have triggered it with me trying to focus this much. But as a result, I get the exact frame I need this reaction to kick in. I get the grab on Oni, and it works out. I don't think Rook can afford to just do random ground Cs against Oni. You take way too much damage. So it's important, if you're going to play this matchup and try to catch something like a back A, to be very confident in your ability to make it come out. But yeah, Jube mentions the reacting versus predicting mindset stuff is revolutionary. Always thinking about it now. I agree. A lot of matchups, like Fantasy Strike's a good game for demonstrating it. Hey, Purple Shirt. That whenever you're thinking about how you interact with your opponent, somebody's going to be predicting and somebody's going to be reacting, and understanding who's sort of in an advantage position whenever reactions and predictions hit the field is very important. But if Rook somehow gets reactions to stuff like this, then it's really, really bad for Oni. Like that, I think it kind of busts the matchup. But I'm certainly not consistent at something like that. And like I said, Oni can sort of throw out any kind of garbage if I'm trying to react to back A, and I'll probably fall for it. After I've started the loop, though, the Oki's fine. You can't do DNC on Wake Up, really. If Rook makes a mistake, then it's fine. But Rook can even do a jump forward A, confirm that there was armor, and then do a throw to get a total of 3 damage on the jump in. So not very good for Oni if Rook's on point with paying attention and doing what they should. So in this one, I waffle a little bit as we start, because I guess that Oni might do a back A. Good question from Jube. Doesn't Skippy play Arg? I don't know. If they do, I would guess that Arg would be a strong pick. Arg's really hard for me to play as Rook. Like, even there are gaps and things that are hard for Arg to do in the matchup, but there's so many different ways for them to approach it. Rook has to really work to figure out what the right answer is. Hi, Y20. So, In this situation, got to have a ground B whiff, which is good for Rook. Get to close a little distance, good predictive jump. And then got a jump C. In this situation, Rook technically has a right answer of using ground C. Ground C will catch Oni if he does nothing, if he doesn't do the cancel. If he does the cancel, ground C will always armor through it and let Rook punish. I think I just take the gamble. I really shouldn't, but it's fine. You can also use ground super in a similar way if you want to spend meter, but Rook usually has more important things to do. This is really good from Skippy. If you predict that Rook's going to throw you and you jump C is the right answer. It does 2 damage, and most importantly, knocks Rook down at a good distance for you to just sort of reset to your favorable position. You get forward A, ground B. Guard Crush is set up. At this point, and this is really vital, Rook wants to walk Oni down and like react to the long range pokes, right? At this sort of range, if Oni does a forward A, Rook can't catch him with a ground C. Landslide's not an option. Oni's cancels beat it cleanly and set stuff up. That's really bad for Rook. So Rook needs to cross this sort of dangerous gulf here and get to the point where Rook's standing probably about here, where if Oni does ground B or forward A, Rook gets to grab it with ground C. But this is the danger zone, because if Rook's walking forward and Oni does forward A, you can't like react with a block. If you do, you'll still take damage. So Rook can choose to wait this out, or what I do here is I waffle around a little bit at the edge of Oni's range. There's some walk forward. I jump back. This is like a really committal version of a shimmy from a fast character. I want to walk until I think Oni's going to try and poke me, and then use this backward jump to set up an earthquake to punish Oni's with. So I go for it. It does not catch anything. I think this is a neat sort of use case or decision. Skippy can use ground super to invuln through the frames. Maybe was looking to charge more and hit Rook at full screen or something like that. Maybe he let go early because he thought, if I did an earthquake right away like I should, then it probably knocks Oni down. I did something weird instead. Oh, that's a good point. Damian says maybe there's a better reaction, like D and C on reaction, the armored move for Oni, the divide and conquer, could probably cross the distance and knock Rook down for 1, which would be pretty good. So, good call. I don't think too many random earthquakes come up at long range, but this is the situation where they could happen. By the way, in a situation like this, I think it's really profitable for Oni as soon as you've finished building meter. This is the spot where Rook has a hard time getting in anyway. Now's a great chance to drop the bots and start closing in on Rook. Bots are a bit risky to call when Rook's closer, but it's very, very powerful. Also nice to have bots at round start, though Rook can't really do anything to punish round start bots call as well, and it immediately puts Rook in a bit of a tight spot if you play around him properly. So I try to bait out a 4A. It doesn't really work out, but I don't exactly get punished for it either. So some different buttons getting pressed. That's good. That's the kind of back A that keeps Rook out. And that also is a really good forward A. This is I guess I had just gotten up, but this is a good example of how this range is dangerous for Rook, because even if I see this forward A coming, there's no buttons that Rook has that punish Oni for this. And as a result, I get pushed back more, and I have a point of guard break set up. Doing pokes, though, is dangerous. If Rook manages to not get hit by them, all of a sudden we sort of close distance, and I'm much closer to the point where I can actually grab stuff. Predictive jump's good. Jump C's okay. It's iffy because Rook can react with different kinds of throws and catch Oni even before he does damage. In this spot, it shows the weakness of the move against jumps. I end up crossing over, and I should just do a normal throw. For some reason, I use ground super, probably more of a panic sort of thing. the idea that maybe there's some risk that Oni could cancel to the invulnerable follow-up right away and ground super safe against it. There's no real reason to, though. I think there was plenty of time for me to just do a normal throw there. Oni only being at 1 does make it easy for Rook to sort of pressure with sketchy jumps.
Round 3.
And Oni's got meter here, so like around start bots is possible. Rook wouldn't be able to do too much. I do a jump, though. This is a good... This kind of idea of using ground super to keep Rook out can be okay, too, I think. It's not as like explosively high upside as using bots, but ground super is a really good anti-air against Rook. Just a little too late on this one, which is a little unfortunate, but it definitely can knock Rook out of the air. In this spot, I think I could get neutral A knockdown. I wasn't super confident in my micro walk, so I decided I'd just cash out on the forward A and keep the walk going, because we're still at a pretty favorable position in neutral. Wonder if that was, I assume that... yeah, that wasn't quite a punish. It was close. If Rook throws right away after whiffing something like that, it probably does work out, but it's just Oki mix till the end of the round.
Perfect. Round 4. Fight. Earthquake.
Okay, so another little interaction to look out for is I did a predictive jump because I thought Oni might do a back A. In this spot, it's dangerous. Oni's in a good place to probably get a forward A. If you look at this kind of spacing, forward A has anti-air hitbox vertically right sort of at the tip of the sword. So we're pretty well lined up for it. If the only problem is if Oni does it and Rook keeps moving forward during the start of the move, I can sort of pass through its effective anti-air range. So it's a really sketchy move to try and use. However, if Rook does something like Earthquake, like what I do here, it stalls Rook out in the air. So this is the situation where if Oni does a forward A, it'll counter hit Rook out of the Earthquake and often get Oni 4. It's a really big blowout. However, Earthquake's very good against a back A that was meant to catch the landing. So that's just the sort of guessing game. Let's see. Alright. Sorry about that. So sorry, let's back up just a little bit. So whenever Earthquake comes down, Landslide sets up a meaty Thunderclap. This is another situation where Oni's not really allowed to DNC. The options Rook's gonna pick all beat it. Thunderclap lets Rook cancel to grab. Both of the throws beat it too. If Rook's in a spot where Rook might use neutral A, then DNC is good, but there's not really motivation. Yeah, purple shirt. Purple shirt beat me up good with some Quince versus Jaina earlier. And this is a nice position to have bots in too, by the way. Good Yomi. Getting paid off for these guesses is important. And with Rook in the corner, Rook doesn't really have room to maneuver around the bots very well. So the best thing Rook can do in this situation usually is you can either stall a little bit, and if Oni commits to stuff on the ground, Earthquake's very strong. Or Rook can try and challenge whatever, like in this case with Oni jumping, I got away with a bit of landslide stuff. I think it's very legitimate, though, for Rook to just sort of throw himself into the bots. Often, using something like landslide in a way where the bots break on Rook means you take some damage, but it prevents the kind of juggle combos that that really kill Rook, right? So in this case, I was going for that. I got a little nervous. I don't think it's correct for Rook to jump there. And the jump B has pretty good coverage, though. It does a hit the bot was coming to, so if I tried to like armor and grab it or something like that, I think there's a decent chance that I just get broken and knocked down. Quick question from Damian. What are Oni's options to GC? When I played the matchup, I had difficulty because it felt like there's no punish or escape of GC that felt good. Yeah, instant jump C is the main punish if you jump out of it. It knocks Rook down and leaves him at about the tip of back A range, so you get a good sort of meaty setup that lets you build guard crush. and put Rook outside the range where Rook has to do that awkward dance around forward A pokes. So that's good. And now I'm stuck in the corner. I have very little time. This is the spot where Rook needs to accept their losses and throw themselves into bots and or Oni. I don't quite do that. I think, I don't know for sure. There might be a opportunity here with something like back A to ground B, anything that lets Oni do a cancel. I think I end up maybe just chipped out and killed here. In this spot, because I'm left with 3, I have helped to spend on stuff and I get a reaction on the jump C. So I don't end up taking any damage at all, and Oni gets bopped by the jump in. So I think some of the neutral decisions were pretty reasonable. There might have been more value for Oni to take in those spots where Rook got pushed out really far. Like there was a really good forward A. Being quicker to call bots is probably okay too, and really capitalizing them to the absolute limit they can do. They offer is really valuable too. So I think it's tricky though, because when you practice the matchup to it, it definitely helps to make sure that your training partner, whoever's running Rook, will react to the stuff they can react to and will properly punish you for using bots incorrectly, or maybe like incorrect isn't even quite right. Not using bots to their full potential is something that can be very punishing for Oni, because it's important that he wins when he gets a chance to have an advantage state. Couple things. Yeah. Jump C is really good. It was actually earlier in the set, Damian. We'll see if we can go back. It might have been the first or second round. Couple other things. Back in the day, you could DNC loop from that spot. I'm glad that's not a problem anymore. But even then, a meaty versus Rook will always win when it doesn't have super, so any meaty can push Rook further away. Yep. If Oni makes a mistake not doing meaty, here's a good example. So jumps out of it, immediately does jump C. See that distance that we get put back to, Damian? This is the kind of spot that is really strong for Oni. So Rook's back, Rook has guard crush, and Oni could call bots, all that stuff. Yeah, it's really strong. So neutral is hard for Oni to play at a lot of distances because Rook's reactions are really strong, but Oni's punishes for guessing right are really good. So I think it's a little tougher for Oni. Oni also has a thing, it didn't come up in these games, but Oni can jump out of Rook's splash on wake up. We'll back out and look at it in training mode real quick, just as a quick demonstration to end the replay review for Oni. But while Oni doesn't have much in the way of like a reversal that beats a bunch of options, there's nothing like Graves ground super that's good against everything. If you jump on wake up, in some situations it's really profitable for Oni, even though like it's pretty counterintuitive. So to give an example, if we set the bot to wake up with jump, and we do a throw. So we'll pause, or even better is if I do this. Normally Rook's safe jump is to just jump forward and hit A right before landing. If you do this kind of safe jump, that works on everybody in the cast. Oni jumped out of it, and here, let me actually get the... I did that a little too early. Okay. Jumping over him, hitting A. So if you look at Oni, he's in pre-jump now. 1, 2, 3. Yeah. It promise it'll work on every character, but it doesn't work on Oni. So if Rook wants to hit Oni, he has to walk forward a little bit and delay his splash so that Oni gets hit as like a flip out. It's really bad actually. Like if I do this, I just slide against him and he jumps out. And it's weird because if Oni doesn't jump, if he does block, he gets hit, right? So a lot of players don't know about this. It applies to Oni, Grave, Midori mostly, and Quince. When you play these characters, you'll get trapped into thinking that you have to block Rook's safe jumps, something like that, when in reality, if you just wake up with jump, and Rook tries to do that kind of stuff, Rook can hit you and you flip out, but he can't force you to block it on the ground, and that's especially good if he ever doesn't cross you up, because then you just get away for free. So powerful stuff, good to know about. And that'll wrap up that talk about Oni.